Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of the Microcast. Today, we're going to mix things up a little bit differently. We have a guest in the studio, and we're going to be doing a round table draft of the worst ideas in running training. So today, we're joined by our good friend and connoisseur of stupid ideas, Sean Van Horn. Welcome, Sean.
Thanks, Zoe. I love sampling stupid ideas as much as possible.
Yeah.
It's pretty much what I was put on this earth to do.
Yeah. In addition to being a sommelier of mistakes, Sean's also has coached many athletes as a high-level runner and N of one for a lot of these mistakes, as we all have, right? As coaches and athletes.
I just hurt myself as much as possible.
Yeah. So today we just wanted to have like a really fun and lighthearted discussion about just some of the goofy ideas that we see in training, things that have been debunked by science, things that we still see. And we're going to do that by doing a draft. So the way this will work is that we have 5 categories: nutrition, gear, training, internet takes, and wild card. And each person will have their number one pick in each category, and we'll be competing to see who can develop the most robust roster of the worst ideas. So the goal is to just get the best list of bad ideas. Nutrition being bad ideas about food and fueling, gear, bad ideas about the tools and techniques that we use in trail running, training, what are the worst training ideologies and techniques that you've seen out there, internet takes, what are the worst things you've run across on the internet, and wild card, which can be something from any of the previous categories. So we just used a random number generator to determine that Coach TJ is going to go first, and and we're going to be doing this in a traditional snake style draft. And each coach can pick what category they want to draw from, and we'll just go around the horn until each coach has picked a bad idea from each category. So, TJ, you're starting us off.
I get to choose the category? I don't
You
have
get to choose.
Order?
You don't. You can go in any order you want.
Oh my
You have the
God.
first round draft pick.
Oh my. There's almost too much pressure. There's too many good options.
Too many good bad
I don't know what to
ideas.
start with. Oh my gosh. And I don't want to mention anything because then I'll give...
You don't want to give your position away too early.
I know. Okay, I'm going to go with the nutrition.
Okay.
I'm going to go with the hot ham and cheese sandwich
Oh,
at 100K and to 100 miler.
all right. Tell us about the hot ham and cheese.
Was it hot before it went in your shorts or no?
I don't remember how the athlete warmed it up, but it was hot. It was gooey. It was really cheesy. And I was just like, wow, that's a GI disaster waiting to happen.
Did the athlete, how did it go?
I'd rather not say.
Oh, God.
Oh, God.
Wow.
If
Okay.
you can imagine
Wow.
how it might have gone.
Yeah.
But the logic behind it was carbs, fats, a lot of sodium in that ham. Like everybody loves processed meats during a race,
I
right?
mean, in essence, they're not wrong. It's just that maybe we differ on the approach, right? Like that's a lot of. I mean, ham is just not a performance food in
You
my
just
opinion.
described a European aid station.
That's what
Yeah.
Well, the Euros would beg to
I
differ.
know. All right, hot ham and cheese. All right, Sean, you're up.
All right, staying with nutrition here. Going through them all. Cool.
All right, yeah. I mean, you can pick whatever category you want, but if you want to go nutrition, you can.
I think we can stay in nutrition and
Sweet, cool,
go
cool,
around. Keep it a little
Yeah.
consistent here. Mine is Skinnier is faster.
Ooh, okay.
Oh, boy.
Which
Oh,
we're going
boy.
to get virgin a little bit of seriousness here. I'll try to bring some humor, but I think this is something that is pervasive through all endurance sports. I started off in cycling, and guys would base their fitness judgment of you by how many veins they could see in your legs.
Ooh.
Which might be more of a dehydration
Yeah.
issue than anything else, but nevertheless, it was a thing. And people would come up and pinch you. Obviously, we know now lots of problems with that.
Yeah.
A lot of crossover into running.
Mm.
And I think all too often there can be this real association with weight and body size with fitness, which is 100% not the case. And fueling yourself properly, eating enough calories is one of the best ways to stay consistent, to stay healthy, not go crazy like me, and have a nice long career that's not full of like back surgeries like I've had.
Yeah.
So I've had a long history with eating disorders, and I'm in recovery now, but it's definitely been a process. And I think this is definitely one of the bigger myths that just continues to be pervasive throughout
Totally.
all endurance sports.
And it's such like a parasitic myth that sort of latches onto our worst insecurities as humans and our desire to excel as athletes. And I totally agree. This is a bad idea that I would love to see die out with this generation of runners.
I think it's also really attractive because there's the illusion of control here, right? Like it's hard to control how fast you are, how fit you are, exactly how your training goes. But for a lot of folks, they can control what they eat.
Yeah.
And this can be a really attractive approach for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That's a solid nutrition pick. All right. My turn. Staying in the nutrition category, I'm actually going to zag here. I'm going to go for the low carb, high fat diet. This is something that we see not infrequently as coaches, and that like every so often starts to sort of trend in the endurance community, right? And that's the idea that if you restrict your carbohydrate intake, your body will be more efficient at processing fat for energy, and that A, there's performance benefits to that, and B, there's weight loss benefits. This is something I would love to debunk, because all of the science that has been done on this sort of diet shows that when people do lose weight, it's just because they're restricting calories. Essentially, it's less about the macronutrient breakdown and a lot more about people just restricting in general. And as we just discussed, restriction, not a cheat code for athletes, not a solid, like positive way to keep progressing. And I feel like the LCHF diet is something that just like kind of continues to persist in sort of the bro science tributaries of the trail running world. And I would just love to see it go away.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's really popular for a few reasons. One, it's a hack, right?
Mm-hmm,
like I think a lot of us are just attracted to this idea that, oh, if I just do this one thing, I'll get faster, right?
Exactly.
Like, you know, it's really hard, like training more is hard. And within reason is generally going to be the number one way that you can get better, achieve your goals, etc. But it's much easier in a lot of people's brains to just think about adjusting their diet. And another point, while there's, you know, a little bit of evidence that adopting these diets might improve your ability to oxidize fat a little bit, in general, one of the main things we're doing as endurance athletes by going out and training long hours is we're
oxidizing fat.
We're teaching our body to oxidize fat. And so actually when they've done these, again in science, when they've done these studies and they look at people who are doing like low carb, high fat, or even like keto versus really, really high end athletes like Tour de France cyclists that are training 30 hours a week, the Tour de France cyclists are just as good, if not better, at oxidizing fat at higher intensities.
Totally.
Because they train a lot. So that's just one of the main things that we're doing when we do high volume or even do specific intensities, is that we're increasing our body's ability to utilize.
Exactly. Like you don't need to hack or trick your body into doing something that it's already going to do in a much lower risk way in training. So this is my like all-time bad idea nutrition. All right. Solid round. Since it's, you know, we're doing snake style again, I'm just going to go right along to gear here, and I get the first gear pick. I'm going to give a shout out to the Vibram 5 Fingers.
No, that was my pick.
It's a good pick.
It's a solid pick.
So these are the little toe shoes that were popular for virgins in 2013. And I'm ready to see those die. There, again, was like really shoddy science that, you know, like some people thought it would like help them be more injury resilient, and it was like all marketing. And, you know, we talked about this on another podcast, but there was eventually a class action lawsuit against Vibram. Just like not a fan. Like it's one of those things of like, there's always this like kind of pervasive myth that quote unquote, like something that's more natural or like back to your roots or like more caveman-y or like more of the old times is like better for you. And that's just kind of that's just not true.
It's an attractive idea, but it's just not true.
It's just not borne out.
If you read Born to Run backwards, it's actually a really charming story about a guy finding out how awesome running shoes are.
Exactly. And you know, like many people, I dabbled in the dark arts of minimalist running. And pretty much
You did?
Yeah,
I did too.
back in college.
Oh,
Yeah.
I never.
You've been a shoe boy for life.
Yep. It's got to at least be a 4mm drop.
Yeah.
I never owned Vibram 5 Fingers, but yeah, at the time, I think we all, or not,
Yeah,
a lot of us definitely went down that road a little bit. It was hard not
I used to jog in like full on cotton, like fit and flare yoga pants and Vibram 5 Fingers. Things have changed, but I do think that I still see them at like outdoor stores and running stores, and I still see people running in them. And
Well, we have some influencers coming back with it.
You
I
guys
know,
they sell them
it's
at
making a
Independence,
comeback.
right?
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, it did leave some good marks on the industry. Before the minimal movement, we didn't have many options for like low drop, well cushioned shoes.
Yeah.
So we started seeing all these options. Hoka helped usher in a lot of that. But it did, I think, leave some positive skid marks.
Yeah. But so that's going to be my number one gear pick. Shout out to Vibram 5 Fingers. You are great at helping people develop celibacy and plantar fasciitis. Never forget.
I still see people wearing those.
We do, because
the
we
guy
live
who
in a
does the
crystal
sound,
sort
the
of
guy
town.
who does the sound at Steve's, he just every
I
day,
feel like,
all day.
I feel like
every
it's an
day, all
excellent
day.
piece of footwear to the guy working the sound panel for a jam band. That is what it's for.
It's a great way to break your sesamoid bone. If
Exactly.
you don't know what that is, look it up.
No.
All right, Sean.
All right, my turn. Cool. So I'm going to go with training. And mine is just the overarching is, look, a squirrel. So this is the tendency for myself and a lot of other folks to grab onto the latest hack, the latest study, the latest new trend in training and just go full bore into it. And
30, 30s 30 times.
Yes, exactly.
Times 30.
Whether it's like, some sort of Tabata training, there were a couple of papers that came out that showed that these really short, intense intervals, similar to Tabata, with really short rests, like 15 by 30 seconds with 15-second rest, repeat, improved performance across the board more so than standard intervals. And you see it with, honestly, with nutrition. There were some studies that came out that showed that training without calories enhanced mitochondrial production, and you had all these pro tour cyclists, like Tour de France level cyclists, going out and heading out on 5-hour rides with just amino acid concoctions. But then, there's studies that come out like, no, actually it's faster if you have 100 grams of carbs per hour. And they all switched within the course of like 6 months to this. And I think it's something that we should all be wary of, that just because there's 1 study, 2 studies, even 3, it doesn't mean that it's something that you should adopt, that we should look at making adjustments and changes to what we know more slowly. Because there's, I think, this human condition where we always want to hop onto the new, always want to find better, different ways to excel, and avoiding, turning your head left and right constantly is probably advisable. There's just some standards in training that we know work. Stick to the basics. It always kind of comes back to those basics.
Yeah, and there very rarely is a study that like totally upends everything we know about exercise physiology.
What about the Norwegian method?
Don't bury my lead.
But even that, so like double threshold, like one, that's new in the running space. I did double threshold days when I was like a 16-year-old cyclist. It's not new in other spaces, but yeah, that's another perfect example of people like, oh, we got to do double threshold. And it's like, well, or
like, I just heard so-and-so on a podcast, he's doing this. I'm sure that this is the best intervention for me. And then, so often, like any intervention really requires like significant timescales for us to really see, particularly in performance, how like, is this impactful? Is this as effective as versus other interventions? And it's so hard to see those things in like the timescales we're used to dealing with as coaches and athletes. And I think so often these things end up leading to injury and burnout before they ever lead to like meaningful steps forward, just because they tend to be super demanding, super extreme, like the weird, like the extreme fueling interventions, or even extreme, like double threshold day sort of Norwegian style interventions. And yeah, I think like it's a part of our culture, right? Like no one's going to get on a podcast and be like, yeah, the secret to training is doing what you've always done, but for longer and better.
Yeah.
That's the issue, though.
The secret is there's no secret. It's really boring.
Yeah.
It's really freaking boring.
That's the human mind is conditioned to want to grab anything that allows for short-term gain, short-term gratification. It's like the silver bullet mentality. You know, can I go keto? Can I do low carb, high fat? Is that, you know, is it minimal shoes? Is it a hot ham and cheese sandwich? You know, like what's
I like that intervention.
Well, in media too, like, you know, that if you write an article that's like the latest hack, there is no secret.
Oh yeah,
it's going to get 0 clicks.
It's going to get 0 clicks.
But if you write something about how training with no calories is going to, you know, make you
it'll do gangbusters
205
traffic.
marathoner, get traffic.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Yeah. It's like we're just, and that's like how news works. It's like supposed to be new information, but oftentimes, particularly in different corners of the internet, it gets repackaged in a way that sort of decontextualizes how big the implications are, right? And like, just because it works for one athlete or 6 male cyclists, does that mean it's going to work for like me, a tired and stressed 30-year-old non-elite woman, you know? So it's always taking those things into context. But I think that, yeah, probably that is a very bad idea, which is like kind of an amalgam of exploring all the bad ideas. It's like an Uber pick. Nice. All right, TJ.
Okay, so do I need to stick? What category?
You can pick any category.
Ooh, I can go to wild card even?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. So many choices.
There's so many bad ideas out there.
Desk stationary bikes. Worst gear.
In gear?
Worst gear.
Do you have one of them in here?
I do not. I have had the pleasure of trying to prescribe desk stationary bike workouts.
It's kind of a coach's nightmare.
I'm like, can't we just compartmentalize work and training into 2 different parts of the day?
Break it down for me. Why is riding a bike under my desk not a good plan?
I feel like people should have a balance between work, training, and other parts of their lives. And as soon as you start mixing the 2 together, you know, are you really working or are you training? Multitasking is kind of BS, and like that's just like the worst example of that.
Yeah, what about like slacking while I run? Is that okay? Is that acceptable?
That's bad, dude. That's just
I really dislike desk treadmills and desk bikes. Not that I've encountered too many, but I feel like it's an excellent way to not recover and not train. To like, it's like exactly in that gray area of like you're not doing anything productive and you're definitely doing something unproductive.
But it's those aerobic gains.
And I feel like this is something that's like always so popular.
More
with
is
like,
always better.
More is always better.
It's
for
like,
longer.
It's like a Silicon Valley bro thing or like a biohacker thing, or like every so often on Runner's World, you'll see an article about like someone on TikTok who ran a marathon like under their desk. And I find that...
Were they barefoot?
Probably.
5 fingers.
Yeah, 5 fingers. I find that just really bizarre. And again, like... what job do you have that you can run a marathon? Because I could not do that while trying to like write articles and research and like coach athletes. But yeah, I think that's a great pick just because it's like, it's bad training, poor use of time, bad work.
Gosh.
If your job is monitoring you that closely, just have your roommate come in and move the mouse around every once in a while when you're out
you can
run.
You can literally buy a mouse jiggler on Amazon.
There we go.
Yeah,
Boom.
buy a mouse jiggler on Amazon and then go outside.
Link in the show notes.
Yeah, all proceeds go to the Zoë Rom treadmill desk fund.
10% off. Use code desk stationary bike.
Microcosm 420. Awesome, nice. Okay, and now you get another pick.
Oh, so fun. Mm-hmm. Goes right back to me.
Yep.
I'm going to go with the nutrition.
You already picked. We already took. You can only one from
each
category.
Wild card, right?
You could take it in wild card.
I don't know. Let me double check here. I'm going to go with full moon cycles. Sorry, this is so funny to me. Reducing volume with the phases of the moon.
Okay. And this is what category? Heavy, what category?
Wild card.
Wild card. That is wild. Okay, tell me more.
I'll do my best to understand what this really means. But apparently when it's a full moon, we don't sleep as well, but we feel more energetic. And so there's this confluence of energy out there in the universe. And so we need to adjust our training in order to get more benefit out of that specific time of the lunar phase, the month. I don't know.
This sounds witchy and I love it. I legit had an athlete that made me reduce their training volume when Mercury is in retrograde, and I feel like this is the same energy.
Was there a chart?
It was logged in the training log.
Yeah, I actually looked it up, and it is a myth that people don't sleep as well at the full moon. It's just like a confirmation bias thing. But
I mean, I howl all night, so
you're a true
but,
you're a wear runner, so
yeah, pretty much.
turn into an Aussie Shepherd on the full moon.
I mean, I'm like, I feel weird about this one because I'm like, is there any data on this? No. Do people sometimes feel off when it's a full moon? Yeah. But I get it like all over the spectrum where it's like, I need to do less or I want to do more. And to be fair, maybe I've only had a few athletes with this particular lunar phase of training. But
lunar training.
I've never prescribed training around it.
No, I haven't seen the evidence. I think you just need a better crystal.
Just go back to responding to how you feel. If
exactly.
You're tired, do a little less.
If you feel tired, regardless of what phase the moon is in, do less. If you feel good, don't do more, because that's how you get hurt.
If only it was so simple.
Yeah. Well, excellent pick. Lunar training.
I like
Lunar
it.
training.
Incredible. Good stuff. All right, Sean.
I'm gonna go with wild card as well.
Okay.
I'm gonna steal one from another category that I already had one in, and this is injury.
Ooh. Okay. Tell me more.
So I actually have the 5 stages of ultra marathon training here. So I'm gonna read them off. Run 3 times as much as your coach says, not twice as much, 3 times as much. Keep running as your Achilles starts to detach from the bone.
Mm-hmm. Sounds right.
After that, make sure you develop a full-on existential crisis when you can't run anymore.
Been there.
After a day or 2 on the couch, you want to make sure to go out and test the injury as much as possible daily, maybe multiple times a day.
Yep.
You know, running, jumping off things, cycling, all the above. You just want to test that nonstop.
I really love testing out an injury to see
the amount of times I've had athletes actually injured themselves testing injuries.
Oh, please don't test it.
Don't test it.
But how else are you going to know?
You know.
We have benchmarks.
We'll agree to disagree. And then after that, when it starts to get a little better, you just want to make sure you tell your coach that you'll never do this again. And then repeat as necessary until major surgery is required.
Oh, God.
This is only funny because we've all done this.
My knee.
Whoa, not all.
Well, okay. 2 out of the 3?
My knee's been hurting recently, and I was like at home, go do some exercises, and then do a bunch of like squats on that, like single leg squats on that knee to see if it made it feel better, and repeated that like 20 times.
And then it blew up.
It completely blew up. I couldn't run for like 3 days after that.
As a younger runner, whenever I would have an injury, I would always the voice in my head was always like, oh yeah, it's getting better. It's definitely loosening up. It was not like your Achilles does not loosen up. Like, that's not what's happening.
I like going out, because when you're not running as much, so you're fresh.
Yes.
So then I really like when I go out just to start at a 5:30 pace and just to hold it as long as I can until my Achilles blows up, and then call Kylie to pick me up because I can't walk home.
Call your spouse crying.
Yeah.
I feel like this is like the injury cycle is a classic bad idea, and it's something that we see so much as often as coaches, right? Like people feel good, so they overtrain. So they can't train, so they feel bad, and then they deal with that by overtraining again.
Isn't that training?
It's the cycle. Yes. And this is,
Is there another way to do it?
Hire a coach. NPT.
C.1. Run
C.1.
3 times more than your coach prescribes.
I have kept so many PTs in business over the years.
Yeah.
5 kids through college. Yeah.
It's Sean's Build Back Better plan for the economy.
I'm just doing what I can.
It's it's how we're dealing with inflation. But no, I think that's like such a poignant point. Like this is a cycle that we see so often with athletes, and some amongst us have even dabbled in it personally as well. How do you intimately, very much intimate dabbling here. How do you get out of that cycle, Sean? Like what have been your tools?
I've gotten out of that cycle.
run 100 miles.
Trying to pan out and think about the big picture instead of getting bogged down in the day-to-day. I think what ends up happening is that emotions take over.
Yeah.
So we're emotional creatures, and just trying to remove yourself from those emotions and some of those obsessive thoughts and feelings of self-worth, etc., and just to bring a little bit of awareness and intelligence into the situation helps a lot. Both with avoiding doing too much in training, avoiding, whether that's doing a big week or just getting back into it. All of that helps. And then once you are injured, trying to have a little bit of perspective on it. I think it's very normal to be upset for a few days and let yourself be upset, let those emotions come, but then try to pan back out and have a little bit more of a balanced opinion on everything going on.
Nice. I like that. All right.
Zoomed out approach.
Yeah. Injury cycles. It's a classic bad idea. All right. So my turn. In the category of internet takes, I'm going to take run streaks.
Ooh.
I hate run streaks. Y'all. Anything that the internet thinks is cool, we should all just know is a bad idea.
What about
right?
bike and run streak, where it's like, well, I didn't run, but I biked, and that counts as streaking?
No, that's not what a streak is, and it's also still bad training.
Okay.
I feel like, and this is something that we see, like it gets perpetuated. Yeah, right. King Rest over here. It gets perpetuated in the media. It gets perpetuated on social media. These really extreme run streaks of doing 50K a day, or even 5K, or even 1 mile a day. Doing 1 mile when you're tired is so shitty for you, when just resting can be much more productive. And I think, again, there's just like these feedback cycles that really encourage people to push and do these extreme things without having a logical training reason behind it. And I think often when you investigate the people who are doing run streaks, their primary motivator isn't so that they can maintain a healthy work-life balance, maintain healthy mental health, and progress in training, right? Like there's usually another motivator, which is usually something related to the attention economy sort of underpinning it.
I think it could also be really related to obsessive behavior.
Yeah. I think
there's
it's like
high crossover with endurance athletes and OCD, eating disorders, etc.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of these patterns kind of take shape. So it's recognizing yourself. I think who we pay attention to on social media is a big aspect. Trying to follow runners on Strava or on Instagram that maybe seem to have a healthier relationship with sport. A lot of the top cyclists I follow, for example, especially if you look at their training on Strava, like, over a year, it just goes like this. Like 1 week's up and then it's down and then it's back up and it's back down. It's just constantly pushing themselves, but then recovering, not just this like constant push. And I think especially sometimes in the running world, we just like to see these big weeks stacked, which correlates with the big, with the days being stacked, because you can't take a day off. It's hard to get to 100 miles a week if you do.
Yeah.
And I think that can just lead people down this bad path.
I think you make a great point. I think it is kind of like a way that people can get validated for what maybe isn't like very mentally healthy behavior. We actually, on the Trail Runner Instagram, posted a story looking at this new study of the increased risk for exercise dependency in ultra runners. And instead of people commenting like, wow, cool study, interesting information, people were like, how dare you call people who are committed obsessive? And there's this crazy cultural conflation between diagnosable mental illness and disorder with like being committed, with being obsessive in a good way, right? Like I think we're all pretty, like we would all identify as obsessive, and some of us here might have like gone on lesser healthy sides of that one. Like I know I've dabbled in exercise dependency, and I think that we need to normalize people talking about the downsides of that, right? Like if you feel that you can't take a day off from exercise, that is a problem, and you should address it with a professional. You should not try to build an Instagram brand based on it, would be my official recommendation.
It's a really complicated overlap, and it's something that I've gotten a lot better with over the years, but it's something that comes up constantly in therapy and conversations with my wife. It's a real problem in our sport, and I think that some of these social media platforms like Strava can can really enhance that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good things
totally.
about it, but there can be some negative sides too.
Well, when you see people with those perfect, graphs in their week by week, month by month, and it looks so consistent, and that's just not really what real training looks like, as you were kind of describing.
Yeah.
And I wonder and think about, is it trail running that's creating dependence, or is it the inverse relationship where these people are coming with those tendencies and
I think it's likely the latter.
Right. And they're using it.
And then, people with sort of those nascent, and like, again, this comes from a place of intimate knowledge of this, but people who are like mentally predisposed to like
Right.
struggle with, needing to self-soothe via, different modalities. Usually like we recognize if someone's using shopping or substances to self-soothe, we culturally have like an understanding that that's not healthy and helpful. Unfortunately, culturally, we don't have the same amount of nuance when it comes to people using things like exercise and obsessive healthy eating or like controlled eating as self-soothing mechanisms. And I think it just, we got to keep finessing that and communicating, and maybe just like, I know that I, as like a member of the media, am just like not willing to reward people for what looks like struggle,
Well, what about as a coach?
Or as a coach, yeah. Like I've had athletes ask if we can do a run streak, and I say no. Like, as a coach, I can only in good faith help you get better, and I want to help you progress in training. And there's just no evidence that shows that run streaking supports that. And there is a shit ton of evidence that shows that it's like not that great for your mental health, not that great for your physical health, and you're just not going to get faster if you're just slogging like every single day. So it's just something I'm like, if you actually want to get better, we don't need to do this. But if you want to do this, like, there's just not really a framework where I feel like I'm helping you not even just progress, but stay healthy as an athlete. Have you guys ever done a run streak?
No, I've been very obsessive about my running though, and run when I'm not healthy. So I completely relate. I have friends that, will run 90 minutes a day no matter what.
Yeah.
What I will say is when I was younger and really struggled with exercise dependency and eating disorder that took different shapes and forms, that my anxiety would go through the roof if I was not able to exercise or actively control my food. Yeah. And over time, through work and age, I've gotten a lot better. Yeah. But I can still really see that in my past. And there are times when it still starts to reel its ugly head, and I have to take a step back and be really cognizant of that. Yeah. And it takes bravery to just say, like, you know what, as much as I would love to run away from like feelings of guilt or shame, I got to just like pay attention to what's going on in my brain and body today, and realize that going on a jog is just like not the solution my brain might be superficially telling me it is. That's integral to having a healthy relationship with sport. Yeah. But again, like, it's also just something we see so frequently as coaches. And I feel like, the phrase run streak just becomes a way for culture to endorse something as healthy that we all kind of know, like, this seems unhealthy. We call it consistency or commitment. Yeah. Or obsession in a good way. And it's like, that's not it. It gets really messy when you're training for a 100-miler. Because you know what's psychotic? Running 100 miles at one time. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. It's so silly. But it's a crazy thing. And a lot of us really ramp our training up and our levels of obsession up. But it's like, oh, but you're training for 100 miles, sweetie. It's okay. Like, I think we all do some sort of mental gymnastics to a certain extent to justify the obsessive behavior. That can come out training for these things. And well, that's true for sure. It's all shades of gray. It's all complicated. I think being willing to admit that you might have some of those issues in yourself, if it is an issue, right, is which for a lot of us, I think is an important step. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So for my second pick, on the other end of that spectrum, in the training category, I'm going to pick high volume, low frequency training, which is when you have an athlete running 2 or 3 times a week, but running like, doing an insane, like basically 30 to 40% of their volume in any given day. Wait, low frequency, high stress concentration. Yes, high volume, low frequency. So like you're running 2 to 3 times a week, but each time you run, you're running like, a significant amount of your
I don't want to put numbers on it because it's all proportional, right? Like
Yeah.
for someone, it could be 4 miles. For another athlete, it could be 12 miles. But this is something we see a lot with athletes who are new to training is they, we'll like work with onboarding an athlete and they'll say something like, man, I just feel like shit. Running feels so hard. I've been doing consistent 40-mile weeks and I feel like I'm not getting better. And I'm like, okay, yeah, wow, that does sound bad. Let's look at your training. Lo and behold, they're doing 40 miles in 2 days,
Yeah.
which is insane. Or like they'll be doing like 30 miles in 2 or 3 days. And essentially what that does is it 2 to 3 times a week gives your body just enough stress that it freaks the fuck out. And then also not enough recovery to actually like recover from that effort and improve and get better. But then by the time you're back on the horse, you're giving your body another macro dose of stress. So one of the things that we really work on when we bring athletes into the program is trying to up that frequency without necessarily upping the volume. So taking people who are running 2 or 3 days a week to like 4 to 5 to 6 so that each day is a lower percentage of their weekly volume. And that's how you like can healthfully grow the volume over time. But this is something that
that's what real consistency looks like.
Yes. Yeah.
And commitment.
Yeah, exactly. Like not all 40-mile weeks are the same, right? So like seriously, we would get people who were coming into the program running 25 miles one day and like 15 the other. And it's like, oh my God, how are your femurs still intact?
I think this gets back to a certain extent to the idea of hacks. People always just want it, whether it's this form of training or something else extreme or an extreme diet. People just want, it's natural for people to want to find a way to kind of shortcut the system.
Yeah.
But endurance sports, other than choosing the right parents before birth, it's really hard to shortcut the system.
Yeah. Yeah. Rather than
If
like,
we're impossible.
getting a DeLorean so you can go back in time. The best,
EPO works pretty well too.
EPO, hell of a drug.
Ketones.
Yeah. Ketones.
Oh God, that's up next.
I can't believe we haven't brought up ketones yet.
It's my time machine.
Let's just acknowledge that, TJ and Sean are in a room together and it's been 36 minutes and this is the first time ketones have been brought up.
I'm shocked. It's because neither of us want to admit our dependence.
Yeah, exactly. We're all sipping on ketones right now. But I feel like this is such like a silly training. Like this is like such a classic quintessential bad training idea because it's the
ketone cocktail.
high volume, low frequency, because it's like, it's the opposite of work smarter, not harder. It's work hard and not smart. And it's like a great way to just keep your body on a hamster wheel of like stress and under recovery. And it's a great way to make running feel really shitty and hard all the time.
Injury cycle.
Yeah.
To highlight my own stupidity. So
that's why we brought you here, Sean.
Yes,
we just
exactly.
want you to just want to highlight your
I
stupidity.
When I was like 20 at this point, I guess. I was just getting into running.
Remember, this is kids could be listening to this.
Yeah, I'll keep it relatively PG here. Nothing too wild. I had just kind of come off a really bad cycling injury that would turn out to be a herniated disc and a compressed nerve. So I wasn't walking right. Still don't walk right to this day. And I was studying abroad in Kenya. And I knew I wanted to bike race when I came back. So I was like, cool, I'm going to start running more.
Yeah.
And I worked out that like energetically, this is where my, intelligent 20-year-old brain was. I worked out that energetically 100-mile week was like equivalent to like a 17 or 18 hour cycling week, which is what I felt like I needed for base.
Yeah.
I've been running for, like 4 months at this
Perfect.
point.
Yeah.
So I was just like, cool, I'm just going to do 100-mile weeks. But I knew at least that just like running, or at least knew like running 20 miles every single day was a bad idea. So I just ran 20
just
miles.
Like something in your gut was like, nah,
no, this might be bad. So I just ran 20 miles every other day.
And you were living in Kenya at altitude, right?
Yes.
Incredible.
I was not up. I was in Nairobi and Mombasa, not up north in the Rift Valley.
Yeah.
Not in E10, but it was great. I would just like run 20 miles every other day, and it went pretty well until
it didn't.
I had like an Achilles attachment rip during a run, and I had to
in Kenya. How was your PT in Kenya?
There was none. I had to limp back home on that run, mostly walking until I had some muggers come after me, and I had to start running again.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Oh God.
How'd your Achilles?
I feel like that's a stress
That's how you
drain.
test the
The
injury.
adrenaline kind of like kicked in. Yeah, I got to test it. So I learned that with adrenaline that the Achilles was fine. But yeah, and then I didn't run for like 4 months after that.
There you go. Yeah, the 4 month to 100-mile pipeline. Not good. All right. Yeah, so that's a no to high volume, low frequency.
No.
All right, Sean, your pick.
Can we do multiple ones in each?
No, the only time you can do multiple is if it's wild card. Otherwise, you have to take one pick from each
Can you do as
category.
many
Okay,
wild
so I
cards
haven't
as you want?
done.
Only one from wild
Shoot,
card.
I'm done.
What
I haven't done internet takes yet.
Okay,
I'm gonna
perfect.
go with. What do I want to do? Okay, I'm gonna go with. It's supposed to be hard.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Yeah,
Stay
yeah.
hard, bro.
Stay hard. Hashtag
So-
stay hard. That is a
Okay, alright.
perfect internet take.
So, ultra running is objectively hard. It's
Agree.
extremely difficult.
Hard agree. And not,
I've-
even not ultra, just running.
Just running. I've done surveys of people at 75 miles, and all of them say that running 100 miles is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, they all say it. Yeah, everyone. TJ was vomiting on his shoes, and he said it was very hard.
It was
His
tough.
whole body was shaking. It was, he concurred that it was very difficult. But I think that often with influencers and some of the stuff that gets thrown around on podcasts, whether this is running shorter distances, running longer distances, is that it's about just being tough and you'll
Yeah.
get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some of that for sure. Mental toughness is important, but I'm a firm believer that mental toughness is developed in training. That when you're training, that the training is hard. The training is where the work is. Putting in that daily work, running not only makes your cardiovascular system stronger and your muscular system more efficient, it also is training your brain. It's all one organism.
Yeah.
And we know this from studies. When they test endurance athletes versus special forces operators, they're actually pretty darn similar in their ability to tolerate pain. And that's not inherent. That's because you're just going out every day and exposing your brain
toughness
to
is
some
it's
sort
like
of
a muscle. It's trainable.
pain and difficulty. So I really believe that, it's the daily training, the daily grind that is difficult. That's where these gains are made. And that if you train correctly, you show up on race day ready to get through it, not because you're super tough, but because of all the work that you did going into it.
Yeah.
Cumulative training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you're talking about.
Right. Like
Yeah.
people aren't necessarily born tough or not. And it's not like just about like if you identify as a tough or not person, like this is a skill that we try to intentionally cultivate in training, right? Like I always encourage athletes, like you don't want every day to feel hard and terrible, but like, or like, do you need to go out and run in a snowstorm in 0-degree temps every single day? No, you don't. But you do need to make sure that you're not babying yourself through training, and you are using concentrated doses of additionally tough circumstances to help flex that muscle. And just like any other muscle, we don't want to overflex it. We don't want to overstrain it, but you do additionally have, like you do over time, have to add load and like intensify and sort of really think about cultivating and developing mental toughness like the trainable skill that it is.
And I think we've all noticed when let's say you have some downtime or take some time off from training, you come back, those first long runs or the first workouts, they just feel absolutely, let's say the first workout you do in a while, it feels terrible. You want to die. You're like trying not to stop during the effort part of the session.
Sounds familiar.
And then the next week, it's so much better. It's so much easier. That's not really enough time for any adaptations to happen outside of some neuromuscular stuff. But what is happening is that your brain is getting a little bit more used to this effort, along with all the physiological adaptations that are going to take place in 2, 3, 4 weeks, etc.
Yeah.
So I just think it's an important part that the daily grind of training is what makes you into the athlete that you want to be. And it doesn't mean that every day you're going out and like flogging yourself while you're running or, like putting clips on your nipples. But you are...
Use our code microcosm420 for 10% off your...
They come in gold. But you're just going out and doing that steady grind day after day. And before you know it, you'll be a different athlete.
Yeah, actually, I saw this really interesting study of swimmers who were tested at a pain test. They had to put their hand in ice cold water. They tested their pain tolerance in their peak season and in their off season. And in their peak season, their pain tolerance was significantly higher because they had been flexing that muscle in their training. And in their off season, it kind of relaxed a little bit. So that I identify as someone currently still recovering from their 100 who tried to do a hill workout this week and went into like full body crisis mode. This sounds like definitely doesn't, no substitute for peer reviewed science, but that definitely resonates. And I hope that encourages people to like, know that it shouldn't always be hard, but your toughness and your ability to navigate hardship can and will improve with training. Nice.
Absolutely. Totally.
All right, T.
Love it. I'll do a training take. I'm going to go with going with the flow.
Oh.
And why is this a bad idea? What is this? It's really going in and training without a plan, intention, or focus.
What does that look like?
But it just works for me, man. I mean, it's all about what works for you individually.
I do hear that this is what Courtney DeWalter does, and I don't think I believe it.
Absolutely not. There's no way she doesn't have a plan. There's no way she gets up every morning and 100% runs
and just vibes it
by
out.
What her vibes are. Also, you can't really take the goats and be like, well, it works for Courtney.
It works for someone who is clearly genetically gifted. It'll also work for me.
Yeah. And so the point of this is like, you can't really succeed in your training if there isn't some structure, some intention and purpose behind it. It's great to go with the flow, and you can incorporate that into the structure of a training plan. But without structure, it's very difficult to actually make improvements over time. All the stuff that you, Sean, were mentioning, cumulative training, there's no silver bullet, there's no hacks and shortcuts. Like, it's all about, doing the things that we know over time are proven to work and repeating them over time for a long time to get the result you want. And, there is a point where you do need to listen to your body and you do need to adapt to what you feel. And we get into trouble into some of these other bad ideas when you don't. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have some base structure, an idea of what you're doing,
of intention.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's going to lead to a lot of the things that we've been discussing.
And I think I see this a lot in the trail running space more than any other.
More than anything else.
We're a vibey
more
people.
than any
you
other
don't see
endurance
this with
sport.
Marathon runners.
Yeah.
No.
There's a lot of like, well, this is what works for me, and I figured this out for myself, yada yada. And there's some truth to that, I'm sure, but there's also some truth to basic endurance principles.
Yes.
I.e., most of the time easy, some of the time hard. Like that's
yeah.
pretty much it. Like you can get in all the details, but that's a lot of what it is. Go easy a lot of the time, sometimes go very, very hard.
Yeah.
And one of the things I see a lot of trail runners doing, maybe especially trail runners that come from like this post collegiate background, or maybe they didn't get the best coaching, the best individual coaching, I should say, or they got burnt out on doing workouts and stuff, is this real gravitation towards the gray zone, just kind of going moderately hard all the time, never really going that easy, and never really going all that hard. So I kind of think about it like blue balls, right? Like you're just like never really going all the way there, and you're not fully easing off the brakes, and then you just like end up in pain and suffering. Yeah. But it doesn't produce results. You end up
like Sean on prom night.
Exactly.
Out in the cold. The Sean Van Horn story.
So yeah, that's just like a common problem that I see. And I think some folks get surprised when they don't show up on race day, because when they're going out and training with their friends, they're crushing them and running fast and running hard. But they're not necessarily putting in the work that we know often leads to success.
Yeah. And I think like, so often is the answer with these things, it's like something in the middle, right? But it's not like you never want to listen to your body and you want to consistently run hard through fatigue or run when you're hurt. But you also don't want to like, oh, I feel a little tired today, I'll just rest. You're like, oh, I feel a little tired today, I won't do a workout, right? You need to learn to sort out the signal from the noise. And sometimes there are times where strategically overriding the body's superficial murmurings is how we advance in training, right? Like doing back-to-back long runs on tired and like maybe a little bit sore legs. Like, again, very intentional, structured, and strategic in training. We're not just doing these things willy-nilly or because it hurts, it must be productive. But going with the flow, I feel like is how you can really exacerbate feedback loops in training of like, well, I'm tired, so I'm not going to do anything. So I never get fitter. So I always feel tired. So I never do anything.
Or I'm always tired. So I'm just going to keep training. Yeah.
Or like, So it is. And that's like why having a coach is so helpful for many people, is because it helps them be like, okay, here's the information my body's giving me. Together, what do we do with this? I think that's a great pick, TJ.
Thanks.
Awesome. Sean, what's your, I think these are our final picks.
I
Is
have
that
an
right?
internet take left.
Okay, maybe not then. Wait,
I go twice now.
Oh, that's right. You go twice and then it's Sean.
Yeah.
All right,
I go
TJ,
2
what's your second
times.
pick?
Oh my gosh. All right. You guys did kind of do Instagram influencers, right? That was kind of the stay hard thing. We did run streaks. I'm going to do time on feet.
Ooh, a classic.
Time on feet. Everyone's favorite
Training
excuse for
methodology.
not getting their training done. Well, I walked 6 miles today. Got good time on
Oh my
feet.
God. If I could have a dime for every mile that an athlete misses in training because they went to effing Disney World, I would be a millionaire. Disney World owes us. I personally feel that the Disney Corporation owes microcosm.
But don't you feel like most people who go to Disney World for a weekend are ready to run a 50-miler after that?
Mentally,
Oh my God.
Mentally.
It just crushes you. Yeah, talk about building up your pain tolerance one day at Disney World. That's like the number one reason for mistraining in my book.
Disney World?
Oh, yeah.
Disney World. I'm just not
That's a lot of
into the
Florida
idea of
athletes.
time on. Like, I get it. Like, we want to. It's a great idea to prescribe training via time, but is replacing an actual structured training day with that as focus and intention. Is that actually replaceable by walking around? Or yard work, or like any of those chores,
Right.
any of these things that
Yard
end up as
work.
time.
Disney World, yard work, and weddings.
Well, yeah, and I think this also kind
so
of
bad.
So bad for training.
This leads into a somewhat adjacent topic of people just making excuses and maybe not being ready to commit to the training. They want the goal, right? Like they want to finish the 100-mile, or they want to finish the 50K, the marathon, but they're not going to make the appropriate time and sacrifices to do the training. So some of us, like me at least, will put training in front of everything else. But a lot of people, someone intelligently won't, right?
Yeah.
But when you do want to achieve these big goals, you're going to have to make some compromises.
Totally.
So you can't just say every weekend I wasn't able to do my 20-mile long run because my wife wanted me to go to Lowe's and do housework, right?
Yeah.
If you just do that over and over and over again, you're not going to finish your damn race.
Yeah.
So compromises have to be made. It's like, do the yard work after the run. If your weeds start to overrun the yard a little bit, it'll be okay.
I know. TJ and I's yard
I'm
definitely.
looking at it right
I'm looking out there right now.
It's
I've
a
cut the grass
jungle.
twice.
That
this
is some
summer.
people who have not compromised yard work for training. That's what I keep telling our HOA, and they're not buying it. But I think that it comes down to the concept of stress is stress, but not all stress is productive stress, right? So often, and there are times where folks can't make concessions. They have family obligations, they have work obligations. And that's all fair. And that's our job as coaches to help navigate that and make the training volume work. But I'll often, help other athletes integrate they want to do a big bike day or a big hike day, integrate those intelligently into the training program. But again, you just have to be really honest about what your long-term goals are and what your short-term bandwidth is. And you have to really temper those expectations, and just walking around is not good training. I think
it's a huge pet peeve of mine where someone will log that in place of their actual prescribed run as if it's training, but it's not.
No.
And
it is stress.
Just own that you didn't do the training.
Yeah.
Don't try to make that but I did this.
Yeah.
We did that.
And
it's not the same.
And there's seasons to life. There's times where you might be able to train a lot and put in the work necessary to complete a marathon, 100K, 100-miler, et cetera. And then there's times when work gets crazy, when family's crazy, and you just might have to adjust your goals a little bit, whether that's a time goal or dropping that race and moving something.
Or dropping down to the 25K and having it be, a family fun adventure.
Don't be afraid to shift your priorities.
Yeah, I think the time on feet thing also, back when I was in my very early ultra running days, I feel like this was something that older men always told me was the key to 100-mile success.
Just
was
get out
just
there
huge
and
days
slog.
on feet.
It's still there.
I know.
Day.
Yeah,
you gotta hike. You
and
gotta walk a lot.
No, yeah, I mean, occasionally I'll have athletes who are doing mountain races, and they'll just be doing long runs where their pace per mile is so slow as to indicate that there's very minimal running occurring on these runs, and it's a lot of walking. And having a few maybe concentrated episodes of big mountain days can be impactful, But when you're spending so much time out there, you're always like, the risk benefit analysis for me becomes like your risk for injury and underfueling is significantly outweighs the really marginal training benefits of, like, at that point, essentially hiking.
I do think there's some benefit to folks hiking if they know that they're going to be walking a lot in their ultra. So this just gets down to the specifics of what you're training
only
for.
Some, though, because if you need to get better at running, then you need to run.
Agreed. I do think some ultra runners undershoot the amount that they need to be hiking, because if you're going to be hiking 50% of the time in your race, like let's say you're doing UTMB, you're hiking all the uphills, walking all the downhills. I mean, myself, sometimes I get to these races and I'm like, what the hell did I do all that running for? Because you're just like hiking the whole freaking time. So I think there's something to be said for that. But you need to be honest.
Focus and intention.
Yeah.
You need to be honest with what you're doing here. Are you training hard, or are you avoiding running because it's hard?
Totally. Or like, I tend to come back to the principle of like, the best thing you can do is build fitness. Like, when in doubt, build fitness.
Love it.
Yeah. Nice. Great pick, T. All right, okay. Sean. Last pick, last round.
So we're going off wild card, right? Because I think we went through everything.
Yeah, I think, you and I both have our wild card picks left.
Okay.
No, you did a wild card, didn't you?
I did do a wild card. But
which one have you not picked from?
No, I picked
did
from
you do nutrition. Gear? No, he did nutrition.
I did. Oh, I didn't do gear.
All right.
I didn't do gear. Okay. So let's go with It's Pretty.
Oh, it's pretty. I love that. That's why all my gear is pretty.
It's so pretty. So I managed a specialty run store for way too long, for 8 years. And one of the number one complaints I would get is that all these shoes are ugly. And you would see customers come in who are training for serious endeavors and wanting to pick their shoes off of color, off of the way they look. No consideration for injury prevention or performance, etc. How, if they fit, if they're gonna like lose all their toenails in the shoe or not. Just 100%. Is it pretty? Is it purple? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I was actually like, you can see I have my shoe rack in the corner. Like, there's a non-zero number of shoes that were bought because of the color scheme.
Understand.
There's a very ugly pair of Hokas on that rack right now.
Oh yeah, those are. Yeah, we'll see if those.
And the
that's for another podcast.
That's for another podcast. For the Carnivore podcast. But it's something where I think that footwear is very important in choosing the right shoes, not just to prevent blisters and toenail loss, but also injuries. Looking at what shoes are correct for the right type of terrain when you're on trail, and making sure that you're not letting aesthetics override all of those more
or because
sane choices.
Your favorite influencer had them.
It's okay to buy some pretty shoes here and there, and to, if it's really between two, pick off a color, but overall, don't just buy the pretty shoes.
What should people be thinking about when they're trying on and buying trail shoes? Because
what their favorite influencer wears.
What does Courtney
David
wear?
Goggins wear?
Yeah.
He's my favorite. You guys didn't realize that.
It gets pretty darn nuanced, so I'm going to suggest that folks go to
their favorite run
specialty shop, try a bunch on, get some advice, get their gait analyzed. The nice thing is most of these shops allow for 30-day, 60-day returns as well, and they can go back and switch them out if they end up not working. But you want to base it off of your arch height, the width of your foot, the way that you run, your injury history, etc. All that comes into play when you're picking a shoe. So It's not just fit, but how it impacts your gait.
Nice.
Awesome.
All right. So my last pick in the wild card category is going to be making your own gels.
Ooh.
This is something that I just have
Wasn't rice balls.
Surprising. I have made my own gels before. I do not feel that it saves any money. And it definitely doesn't save time, right? I know, I'm not, gels aren't cheap. That's fine. But you know what else isn't cheap? An MRI because you underfueled and you got a femoral stress fracture, right? I think there are ways in life to cut corners. Yeah, unless you're in Europe and it's all free, right? Shout out to socialized medicine. But I think that there are ways to be really cost effective and to cut corners. And I really just would stress that with athletes, fueling isn't it. I remember when I first moved to Aspen and was really trying to save money, I would make my own fuel for running, which was like, I would make like baked bananas and cinnamon. I would like cut up a banana and like bake it in like honey and whatever. And A, I never knew exactly how many calories I was getting. And B, the thing would basically turn into like butt pudding in my waist pack. It was so gross.
It goes
and there's
well
just
with
like
a ham and cheese sandwich though.
Yeah. I mean,
cheese.
I was just like scooping it out with my feet. Like it was just like not quality sports nutrition. I think if you like to cook, this is a cool thing to do. But I just think that like there's better ways to save money. You know, like take a look at like whatever subscriptions you have that you don't currently use. Do that before you start making your own gels. I think it's just a really silly place for people to. It's so time consuming.
Who's got the time?
I do not.
My God.
I personally do not.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can also make fueling a little cheaper if you want to. You can practice with some non-gel options when you're out there, which I think is a great idea for racing. So Pop-Tarts are pretty damn cheap. There's a lot of other great options. You know,
pretzels,
goos are
chippies.
pretty freaking cheap per calorie. So you don't have to be using the Morton gel on every run. I do think you should practice with what you plan to race with, but you don't necessarily have to do that on every single run. One of the best stories I have of a friend trying to save money on fueling. So this is back when I was a cyclist.
Yes.
And he figured out that I think Breyer's ice cream was the cheapest food per calorie. And this somehow, so he was doing that for a while. A lot of his calories were coming from Breyer's ice cream. He's 20 years old, elite cyclist, very fast.
Yeah.
And somehow this morphed into a bet to see how long he could fuel himself with only ice cream and beer. He could have water, but other than that, only ice cream and beer, and he had to keep training at least 20 hours a week.
No electrolytes?
I think you could maybe put salt in the beer.
Okay, all right.
I don't know if we discussed
salted
that.
ice cream. Okay. That sounds kind of good.
So just like on rides, you just drink water and ice cream or beer.
I want to see this man's colonoscopy.
Yeah, and then after the ride, just period. Like
how long?
His whole diet, 8 days, and then he started vomiting everywhere.
That sounds right.
Oh my God, really?
I mean, actually, like I've read online, like of people doing like the Halo Top ice cream challenge, where like all you eat is Halo Top, and apparently it just like within 24 hours, your whole thing is different. But yeah, I think there's like again like. There's other ways to, I understand that, and like, I want to be sensitive to people's like financial situation. I just think there are better ways. Like if you currently are making your own gels, but you're subscribed to Hulu, just go ahead and unsubscribe from Hulu. It's like the same. I swear. It's the same.
But Hulu is such good shows.
Finish the bear, and then unsubscribe from Hulu. Okay. That would be my professional coaching recommendation. I just don't think it's like, I don't think it's worth it. And like, if I think about how much value my time on the market would command, I wouldn't be compensating myself for that labor. It's just so much easier to pick up a few gels from the running specialty store, or again, like using other snacks.
From the grocery store and store that in your running
just
pack.
A full baguette.
It can go in the running pole. It fits in the running pole quiver pretty well.
Yeah, the baguette. It does fit right in there.
Yeah. Yep.
When it gets stale, you can beat off mountain lions with it.
Exactly. It's a self-defense baguette. But that's my last pick. And I know I feel like I'm going to get some heat for that one. So
no, that's a good one.
Okay,
solid.
do we all
go Pop-Tarts?
Then these are really great, really strong draft picks. There's a lot of really amazing bad ideas. Was there anything that anyone like? Is there an honorable mention anyone wanted to just quickly throw in there?
Sean,
there's probably a bunch, but one that I'm looking at on the screen here is just the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Oh, yes. I saw this one in your notes. Tell me more.
Just being wary of that. So those who aren't familiar, Zoe might correct me here, it's a psychological phenomenon that happens with most of us. When you first start learning about something, you really overestimate your knowledge and kind of immediately think that you're an expert. And then as your knowledge starts to increase, you become a bit more aware of how little you know, and your confidence in your ability starts to decline, and then eventually over time your competence and the view of your competence kind of match. So I think this can happen a lot when people first get into training or running. They read a couple things online.
I think podcasts
really whatever I'm saying
to
right
this.
now, just assume that it's all crap. But podcasts, influencers, etc. People just learning a little bit about training, a little bit about nutrition, and kind of running with it and assuming that they are then the expert. So just continue, this goes for me as well, for all of us, just continue to have an open mind and learn and be willing to be wrong and to adjust your opinions. Don't chase a squirrel all over the place, like I said. Kind of stay the path, but make sure that you're getting input from other people on the right path.
And always be curious about what you don't know. I feel like this is something I experience a lot because as a female journalist in the sports space, I've had like many times a man tell me about an article I either wrote or edited for Trail Runner. Like some guy or like someone be like, hey, have you ever heard of the Leadville 100? And I have to be like, yes, I have run that. Yes. Like I do know what I'm talking about. I promise. And that is just like a normal human thing of like when we first get into something, before we really understand the breadth and depth of information that's available there, we tend to think that we see more of the picture than we actually do.
Do you remember the Molly Seidel airplane incident?
No.
So evidently, I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. Maybe we'll get some mail back that I'm incorrect. But Molly Seidel was on a airplane. And so for those not familiar, silver medalist in the marathon at the Olympics.
Bronze medalist.
Sorry, bronze. Very fast, very great athlete. And she sat down next to this guy and they started talking about running. And then he starts explaining to her, not knowing who she is in all fairness, but starts explaining to her how you should train.
Amazing. Actually, like, didn't this happen to her
amazing.
on Tinder one time as well?
I'm sure.
Yeah. I think that's like just like a classic, like, oh man, always just be careful when you just want to connect with someone via explanation, make sure that they aren't the third best marathon runner in the world before you do.
Really shows how much that guy knew about running.
Exactly. He like literally didn't know who Molly Seidel was.
I know. It's unbelievable. That's hilarious.
Yeah. I love that.
Have you heard David Goggins though?
Yeah. I mean, oh my God, like that's my pet peeve about running is when I tell someone that I'm meeting out in the wild that I'm an ultra runner and they're like, have you read Born to Run? I'm like, I'm literally friends with Chris McDougall. Just like take a but this was super fun.
In trouble for my comment then about
no, I mean, no. Nothing is sacred here.
Every week on this podcast.
At least once a week. We're contractually obligated to make a minimalist running joke because we're in the pocket of big foam.
Big foam.
Yeah,
that's P-backs.
Big P-back. Honestly, I wish we had that P-backs money coming in.
The EVA coming in.
Yeah, that EVA money.
Much higher volume though.
Sponsored by New Balance in the 90s. But this was super fun, you guys. I feel like we learned a lot. We got to talk about some serious ideas, some goofy ideas. It's just always fun to put our heads together with other coaches. Who do we think, just quick straw poll though, who do we think has the best, worst ideas?
The best, worst ideas?
Yeah, like who had the strongest?
I'll go with Sean. He had a lot of good input.
Yeah.
A lot of good info.
I'll go with Zoe because I can't say myself. So
yeah,
no, but I
like Sean.
You always bring it.
Yeah, some great bad ideas here. Really strong team. This was super fun. Thanks for everyone to listening. If you have committed any of the above bad ideas, feel free to reach out to us at microcosmcoaching@gmail.com. Get in touch. We'll help set you on the straight and narrow here. And thanks for tuning in. Sound off in the Slack and in the comments about whose roster is the worst. And thanks for tuning in.